hello. Are you a Silurian?
But I think I could convince them on the condition that you release those trapped men first.
Those apes have only shown hostility to us.
And you to them. Someone has to make a move.
A civilized race like yours waging unprovoked war.
Defensive war, Doctor. There is a distinction. Silurian law forbids any other.
Defensive. There's no such thing. There can be no alternative to peaceful coexistence.
There is, Doctor. A final solution.
Genocide.
You are beautiful.
Hello, and welcome back to the History of series. Today we will be adding to the archive the Silurians, so without further ado, let's begin. The Silurians were the original masters of Earth. Both the Silurians and Sea Devils were led by the Triad, their custodians, if you will. In the early era of their rule, there were many stories of the rise of their civilization. One noted legendary warrior chieftain was Mazkal of the Third Dynasty, who fought against his evil alter ego, the legendary two-faced lizard. Another figure was Panunini, who was the leader of the Southern Clan and conquered much of the world, which he ruled cruelly for a brief period of time until his defeat at the hand of Tunwiz. Following that event, the previously imprisoned and cast-out tribes came together in a new, more unified civilization that ate their foes. Whether these were folk stories or historical facts was of no importance to them, as they inspired the Earth reptiles for millennium, with many of these writings left within their Hall of Heroes. In this era, the Silurians coexisted in groups of clans that lived alongside the original ape primitives that were developing on their planet. As a lesser species, these hominids became the primary livestock of the Silurians. In order to improve their flavour, a Silurian scientist named Tulok began to genetically engineer the apes. This led to a faster breeding cycle as well as intelligence, creating early Homo sapiens. For his genetic crimes, the Silurians banished Tulok and his creations to die in the coming cataclysm. These primitive, ape-like men began to hunt in packs and attack the Silurians. They also began to prey on their crops, leading the Earth reptiles to use plagues to exterminate them. The Silurians themselves were afflicted by the plagues of the Red Leech. At the height of their civilization, the Silurians lived in cities of metal and had uncontested dominion over the planet. They had as many political factions as mankind would have later on. However, this era was cut short. Some of their scientists, such as Dr. Wallach, calculated that a small planetoid was destined to draw the atmosphere away from Earth when it passed very close to it, preventing the surface from being breathable, wiping out all life. Others, such as Nagara, believed it to be a simple scare story, while Sauron's figures showed it would miss Earth completely. Despite this, the government had ordered the construction of shelters where the Silurians would remain in suspended animation when the small planetoid first appeared. The planetoid appeared either 2 or 12 years before the Great Hibernation took place. Either way, the hibernation process took a while, with different clans, subspecies and factions all hibernating at different times and places. The Third Doctor repeated the claim to Mark Marshall that the Silurians built the shelters when they thought the planet would suck away Earth's atmosphere as it rushed by. Conversely, the Fifth Doctor recalled that the Silurians' astronomers predicted that Earth was about to be struck by the planet at the time, and the 11th Doctor described the trajectory of the planet the astronomers had predicted as a crash course. When the planet was days away from causing the calculated catastrophe, the Silurians agreed to take refuge inside of their shelters so their civilization could survive the coming disaster and reclaim their world once the danger had passed. One group of Silurians decided to leave Earth entirely in order to escape the disaster. Boarding the Silurian Ark, a spaceship carrying Silurians and several species of dinosaur, they placed themselves in suspended animation, with the ship programmed to bring them back to Earth long after the effects of the upcoming disaster had dissipated. The Silurians were divided on the matter of mating between the land castes and the aquatic castes. Normally, such matings were forbidden, and any offspring were killed along with their parents. However, facing the threat of a global cataclysm, they allowed a colony of such hybrids to remain in their shelter under the island of Lythe, taking place in the Great Hibernation with the rest of the Silurians. The Silurians sealed themselves in their underground hibernation units along with a male and female of all the more useful reptile animals, and planned to suspend their lives until the atmosphere returned by using a device on the ground above each shelter. When the atmosphere returned, a massive amount of electricity would trigger a reawakening. However, they were unaware the dangerous planetoid that they had predicted would draw away the atmosphere was instead drawn into Earth's orbit and became the Moon. As a result, the Silurians were never revived, as the atmosphere was not drawn away for it to return to the planet. Although the atmosphere was never completely drawn off and the creatures on the surface did not suffocate, many mammalian life forms perished, while others survived, due to the great forces caused by the Moon's appearance creating cyclones and tidal waves. During millions of years in hibernation, the reactivation machinery of the hibernation units deteriorated, leaving an unknown number of Silurians, possibly billions of them, trapped in sleep. Despite their intentions to punish Tulok, the renegade scientist was able to sabotage a number of the hibernation chambers and destroy them. The Archive tried to attract the Silurians to Saturn in order to repair itself. Though the Silurians noticed one of Saturn's moons being destroyed, they were too busy preparing for the Great Hibernation to investigate. The dates of these events, including the eras of Earth's history they took place in, are unclear and quite contradictory. At the Archive, we make no attempt to place the Silurians, as it's just way too complicated. Over the millions of years since their rule, many of the Silurians' prominent structures, such as the Hall of Heroes, were lost to erosion and plate movement, which erased any traces of their ancient civilization. Eventually, some of the Silurian hibernation units were activated and opened, millions of years after they should have. In 102 AD, a number of Silurians were part of the alliance of the Doctor's worst enemies that imprisoned the 11th Doctor in the Pandorica. Charles Darwin and the HMS Beagle expedition, along with the 6th Doctor and Evelyn Smythe, encountered a rogue Silurian group in the Galapagos Islands. The leader of this group was Tulok, the scientist responsible for creating humanity's prehistoric ancestors via a forbidden breeding program. Prior to 1888, a group of Silurians were awoken by the digging of the London Underground. This led to the death of several navvies. Vastra, a skilled Silurian warrior who had been awoken by their digging, wanted revenge. The Doctor convinced her to live peacefully in London. In 1888, she resided with her human partner Jenny, although she still fed on human criminals. Then she and several of her soldiers were called up by the Doctor to fight at the Battle of Demon's Run. Vastra subsequently became the leader of the Paternoster Gang, protecting the Earth of that era from alien threats. In 1892, the Silurians led by their leader Vekis found a piece of the Eternity Clock and vowed to reclaim Earth. They planned to use the power of the clock to pump a toxin that would wipe out the human race. The 11th Doctor and River Song destroyed the toxin and took the piece of the clock. Jules Verne and the Doctor once encountered Silurians in a giant squid. This incident was worked into 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, though the Doctor had some difficulties convincing Jules to remove the parts of the Silurians. In 1903, after receiving a wealth of information from the future, Grigori Rasputin saw beings which lived beneath the surface of the Earth. In the late 20th century, a group of Silurians were awakened from hibernation by the energy from a nearby nuclear power station centre at Wenley Moor. After a disagreement between Octel Lede and Morka over a course of action, Morka won out, killing Octel, and the Silurians tried to reclaim the planet from humanity by releasing a deadly virus. This plan was prevented by units Dr. Liz Shaw and the Third Doctor, when they had the cure mass-produced. After this plan was thwarted, they tried using their molecular disperser to destroy Earth's Van Allen belt so that the sun's radiation would burn the humans to death while allowing the cold-blooded Silurians to survive. But Liz and the Doctor stopped them again, when they overloaded the disperser and the facility's reactor. Despite the Doctor's best efforts to broker a peaceful solution, the Silurian base was bombed by unit by order of Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart. While the 3rd and 11th incarnations of the Doctor stated in some accounts that the tribe had all died, according to another account, the 3rd Doctor said that they were only entombed. Shortly afterwards, the 2nd base was awoken in Oregon, and was likewise dealt with by unit. Following this, the Silurian Sea-Devil hybrids Bal Dejo and Tani kidnapped a human boy named Mark Marshall and took him to their shelter under the island of Lythe to experiment on him. They intended to prolong the hybrid's short lifespan, but Bal later allowed Mark to be returned to the British mainland when Mark's presence in the shelter no longer suited the hybrids. When the shelter's leader, Chuck, was killed by a C-19 agent, Bal and Tani's power-hungry mother, Augie Dejo, took over and intended to take back Earth from humanity. her fleet was pushed back by Unit on the Kent coast. Bal and Tani took over the shelter, while Augie escaped in her battlecruiser. Liz Shaw offered to continue to help the hybrids find a cure for their condition. In the aftermath of the Wenley Moor incident, Unit began a search for any other colonies using a device invented by the Doctor. Mike Yates was involved, while Benton trooped around the country. Standard protocols were to keep an eye on the Silurians to make sure that they were asleep and alive. Some colonies would awaken over time, but, when seeing how many humans there were, opted to return to hibernation. In 1983, Sarah Jane Smith and K9, while visiting Warren Martin's archaeological expedition in Egypt, discovered an underground city of Silurians and Sea Devils. Sarah Jane opened diplomatic relations with them. On her return to England, she contacted the Brigadier, who wished to make amends for his earlier mistakes. By 2003, there were Silurians serving as part of Unit, in particular Immortal, who worked with Liz at Tranquility Moon Base, located on Earth's moon. Some years later, Sir Alistair helped the Silurians try to finally make peace with the humans, though the general public believed it to be a stunt involving men in rubber suits. Later, the Silurians aided Unit in finding a cure for the plague. In late 2010, a fossilized Silurian egg was discovered by the Pharos Institute. Sarah Jane went to the institute to take a look at it. In the 2010s, a Silurian was a resident of the hidden Trap Street in London, which housed lost aliens on Earth under the protection of Mayor Me. As with the rest of the inhabitants, it appeared cloaked in human form through use of lurkworms. In 2020, a Silurian city in Wales was awoken by a mining trial led by Nasreen Chowdhury and Tony Mack. The giant drill they used had attacked the Silurians' oxygen pockets. The Silurians took corpses from a graveyard for study, as well as Mo Northover and later Amy Pond as living subjects. Eventually, they contained the village in a force field and captured Elliot Northover. Alea came to the surface and was captured. While the 11th Doctor and Nasreen travelled to the Silurian city to negotiate her return in exchange for Mo, Elliot and Amy, the 11th Doctor and Nasreen were captured, while Amy and Mo escaped. After an abortive rescue attempt, the Doctor was able to convince the Silurian leader Eldane to negotiate with Amy and Nasreen for the future of both of their races. Back on the surface, Ambrose tried to help her family and threatened Alea, accidentally killing her just as the group was summoned to the city. She also set the drill to start burrowing again in 15 minutes. Alea's death and Ambrose's threat to the city was received quite badly by the Silurians, especially by Alea's sister, Restak, who tried to kill all the humans in retribution. Eldane managed to lead the Doctor and his friends to the laboratory. He released a deadly gas into the city, forcing Restak's troops to return to their hibernation. The Doctor stopped the drilling by destroying the drill with an energy pulse, which also sealed off the city in a cave-in. The timer was set for 1,000 years to permit a second chance at negotiation. Around 2084, a group of Silurians allied themselves with the Sea Devils to invade Sea Base 4. They attempted to launch nuclear weapons to provoke a war between the two major power blocks, but they were killed off when the 5th Doctor, perceiving no other more peaceful solution, flooded the base with hexachromite gas in order to kill them. At some point after the 2084 incident, the human colony faced a devastating war against Earth reptiles. Humans developed a doomsday device which they placed in a base around the moon colony, designed to scour the surface of the satellite. To combat this, the Earth reptiles dispatched Quora to infiltrate the base and take it over. However, she was unaware of an entertainer called Jen Yates who was not on the crew count, and this last survivor managed to activate the weapon, killing everyone in the colony. Though Quora killed Jen, the shock of the event led to Quora taking on the entertainer's personality to shield herself from the truth. She believed that she was now a human, and that she was guarding the weapon alone in case the Earth reptiles won the war. After a visit by the 7th Doctor, Quora remembered the past and killed herself by walking onto the surface of the moon without a spacesuit. In 2367, Solomon sent a distress signal to the Silurian Ark. Realizing that there were valuable dinosaurs on board, he and his robots slaughtered the Silurian crew. Unable to pilot the ship back to its destination as it required 2 pilots with the same gene chain, the Ark headed back to Earth, where it was detected by the ISA. The Doctor formed a gang to investigate the ship after learning of the situation, and to save the ship from being shot down by the ISA. As the ship came under threat of destruction, it was piloted to safety by Brian and Rory Williams, who had the same gene chain as they were father and son, while the missiles sent by the ISA were tricked into destroying Solomon's ship instead. In the aftermath, the dinosaurs were taken from the Ark and transported to a new home on Siluria by the Doctor and Brian. By the 26th century, the interspecies conflicts appeared to have come to an end. Silurians and sea devils were accepted into Earth society, and the term Earth reptile was apparently popularized among humans. A small squadron of Silurian vessels fought off and drove away the Dalek force at the Battle of Alpha Centauri during the Second Dalek War. By the 26th century, when solar flares were threatening to engulf the Earth, the Silurians built a spacecraft, surreptitiously attaching it to the bottom of the human zone. After takeoff, a Dalek attack caused the Silurian ship to break away from the humans. In the 30th century, the Earth reptiles were part of the Earth Empire, considered full members of the government as an Earthborn species. In 3110, a Silurian was running the Musée d'Orsay when the 11th Doctor visited it. Around the 52nd century, a group of armed Silurian warriors, resembling those from Wales in 2020, were called upon by the 11th Doctor to assist him in the Battle of Demon's Run to rescue Amy Pond. Many of these Silurians were killed by the Headless Monks. In the 67th century, a Wenley Moor-type Silurian appeared among the perils of the constant Dishian, listed in a vid briefing aboard the hospital ship Saranga. In the 91st century, a Silurian actor starred as the protagonist of a film adaptation of H.G. Wells's The Time Machine, spoken in haiku. In the 101st century, the Earth reptiles were part of the Union. At least one Silurian similar to the Welsh tribe was abducted and sent to face their fear in the Minotaur's prison ship. A dead Silurian was seen on a battlefield. A corvid fed on its mind. A Silurian called Wanda trapped humans in the monkey enclosure in the zoo. The Master attempted to kill the Doctor's ally, the Grak, with a group of Silurians. Silurian arcs were present above Trenzalore when they were drawn there by the First Question. They either retreated or burned during the siege of Trenzalore when the Daleks broke through the planetary force field of the Papal mainframe and intense fighting began. The Silurian was at Florana when the 11th Doctor, Amy and Rory went there for a summer holiday. The Silurians joined Rassilon's alliance of races in the Great Inferno, the war with the Hyperions. After the Hyperions were defeated, the alliance then went on to purge the universe of other threats to universal harmony, one of these threats being Count Diff of the Cybok Imperium. In one alternate version of the 1970s, the Third Doctor having died during the Wenley Moor incident, the Silurians ruled Earth unchecked. They reintroduced dinosaurs into Earth's ecosystem and reduced the surviving humans into powerless scavengers. Another alternative history branched out from the same incident. In this timeline, the Third Doctor and the Brigadier died during the same incident. However, the Silurians, Sea Devils, and humans now lived in peace under the URIC, or United Races Intelligence Command, formerly known as UNIT. In an alternative timeline created by the Black Guardian, where the First Doctor never left Gallifrey and instead became Lord President, the Silurians and Sea Devils fought over Earth with a number of alien invaders, such as Zygons, Ice Warriors, and the Sontarans. This timeline was destroyed when the Seventh Doctor retrieved the key to time. In a world where all of history occurred at once, Silurians lived alongside humans. Malekith served as physician to the Holy Roman Emperor, Winston Churchill. In an alternative timeline where the Cybermen used Time Lord technology to conquer all of history, the Silurians of prehistoric Earth were converted into Cyber-Silurians and transformed Silurian arcs into Cyber-Arcs, with the intention of launching the arcs into space and seeding the universe with cyber technology before humanity could begin to evolve. The 11th Doctor and Alice Oberfune attempted to stop the Cyber-Silurians, but the Doctor was upgraded into the Cyberiad on board a Cyber-Arc after teleporting Alice out to escape several newly awakened Cyber-Silurians. The Doctor used his cyber connection to deactivate the emotional inhibitors of the Cyber-Silurians. The Cyberiad killed all of the Cyber-Silurians and immediately launched the full Cyber-Arc fleet into space. However, following the 12th Doctor and Rassilon's regeneration of the universe via the Eye of Harmony, these events, and by extension the rest of the timeline, were erased from history. In a parallel dimension, when Avalon was created as a shelter for the Catu Velorni, some Silurians were unintentionally brought there as well. Their descendants were known as the Fair Folk. The Lizard Kings were the Mondasian counterparts of the Silurians, much as humans and the Mondasians were identical. In the Unbound universe, the Silurians were rendered extinct when Mike Yates time-travelled back to their era and detonated nuclear warheads, killing them all. And that is the story of the Silurians, a race that within a matter of seconds for them, but millions of years in actuality, reduced their great empire to nothing. When exactly their race began is unclear, as despite being called Silurians in the original story, it actually places them as coming from the late Triassic era as well as the Silurian era, both of which are about 200 million years apart. So yes, it's a dating controversy that rivals even units. But anyway guys, if you enjoyed watching this video, then make sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. More history videos will be coming soon, so make sure to stay tuned for them. But anyway, thanks for watching.